Good evening, everybody. My name is Dishika Chopra, and I'm the Joint Secretary of BVPCSI at Bharati Vidyapeeth's College of Engineering, New Delhi. I, on behalf of BVCSI, would like to thank everyone for joining in today. We hope that your families are keeping safe and healthy. Most of all, we're deeply thankful to Mr. Sachin Pullil, as speaker for today's event, for taking out the time to help all the participants here in getting clarity over studying abroad. Mr. Sachin Pullil is working as a digital admissions coach. In 2019, he himself scored a perfect 340 in his GRE and got accepted by University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League college. Now he let Now he helps thousands of students with his webinars and free resources on his website to get access to as much as possible for great scores even in TOEFLs and IELTS. Sir also has a really informative YouTube channel wherein he answers to all the queries people have about studying abroad. We welcome you, sir. So the topic for our webinar is mentioned on the screen and it goes as Beginner's Guide to Studying Abroad. Lastly, I would like to say that if anybody has any question in between, you can send them in the chat box and sir will take those up in the end. Now I'm going to hand over to Mr. Sachin Pullil. You can start with the session, sir.
Yes, hello everyone. Can you guys hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Hello. Yes, you are audible.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So hello everyone. My name is Sachin Pullil and I am a digital admissions coach. So I don't think I need to introduce myself any further than the introduction Dishika already gave me. So in this session, hopefully you guys can see my screen. This is the beginner's guide to studying abroad, right? So by the end of the session, you guys are gonna basically have a fundamental understanding of how to apply to colleges abroad, what are the different degree options available, what are some cool countries you can apply to, when should you start your application, how do you start your application, and so on, right? So I just have this quick survey that I was hoping that you guys will fill out before we start with our presentation. Okay, so we just click on that survey. It's just like a very quick, I think 1 or 2 minute survey. It won't take very long, and you can do this, as I do the introduction to the session as well, so you won't miss out on anything. All right. Okay, so like I said, this is the beginner's guide to studying abroad. After this webinar, you will have a fundamental understanding of how to apply to colleges abroad. It's a super confusing process, so I know that you guys might be, a little bit confused about when to start your applications, which exams to take, and all that. So I want to give you a little bit of clarity on what exactly you need to do in order to get into a good college, when you should apply, and so on, right? So I have 3 very simple guidelines for this session. All right. So first guideline is I want you guys to go grab a notepad and a pen, because I'm going to be giving you guys a ton of information, and most of it, I'm going to be going through. I'm going to be speaking verbally, right? So a lot of it you will not be able to remember after the session unless you actually take down notes, right? So go quickly grab a notepad and a pen if you haven't. Second guideline is we'll have our Q&A at the end, because when I'm presenting, I can only see my PowerPoint, so I can't see the questions. So if you guys have questions, and if it's in the middle of the session, I won't be able to answer them. But don't worry, we're going to have a Q&A session at the very end, so I'll make sure to answer all your questions. Right. And the third guideline is I want you guys to engage, right? So I'm going to be asking you guys a bunch of questions throughout the session, and I'm hoping that I'll get a response from you guys so that I understand. I have a better picture about where you guys are currently at, and where you need to go. Okay. So keeping that in mind, I want to know when you guys are planning to go to college. Okay. So what intake, or maybe which year are you planning to go to your master's or PhD or MBA program? Okay, so if you're applying for 2022, that would be next year. You would type 2022 in the chat. If you guys are planning, maybe if you're like a little bit in second year or something, so you want to go after you graduate, that would be maybe 2024, 2025. And depending on, if you're planning to work for a year or 2 or 3, that date will vary, right? So let me know which intake you're planning to apply to, like, fall 2022, spring 2023, let me know, okay? Just very quickly, just type your answer in the chat, and that'll give me a good idea. Okay, so fall 2022, spring 2023, okay. All right, perfect. 22, 23. So within that range, okay, so perfect. So if you guys are planning to apply to 22, 23, then this is a good idea to get started. 24, that means you're here pretty early, so you're going to have like a lot of time, so don't worry about that. 22, 23, this is a pretty good idea. This is a pretty good time to get started on, looking into it. Especially for fall 22, most of my students are currently planning on applying to fall 22, so they're already in the middle of their exam preparation and stuff. All right. Okay. So here is the agenda we have for this session, right? So now I know that it looks like a lot, but most of this is just like one slide, so it won't take very long, all right? The first thing is I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are as an organization and about who I am. And then we're going to give you a bird's eye view of the application process, right? So in general, what do you guys need to focus on? How do you start? What are the different steps? And what do you need to do before you fly to college? Then we're going to look at the different degree options, right? So what are the different options? What are the different degrees that you guys can apply to? And based on technical degrees and non-technical degrees. Then most popular countries. I'm going to give you a list of the most popular countries, and we're going to quickly look at the pros and cons for each country. And then we're going to look at general program requirements. Okay, so when you apply for a particular degree abroad, they'll have some basic requirements that you need to clear, and that's what we're going to look at here. Then we're going to look at building a profile. So how are you guys going to be competitive to get into the top universities? And that's what the whole profile building is about. Then we're going to give you the timeline of the process. So when do you take your examinations? When do you shortlist your universities? When do you write your statement of purpose? When do you apply? When do you apply for your education loan? When do you apply for your visa? When do you actually fly to college? And so on. And then we're going to quickly go over getting an education loan and visa. So I'm not going to focus too much on this because this is like way, way in the future for you guys. You don't have to worry about that now. And then I'm going to go over some FAQs, some frequently asked questions that students often ask me. And then I'm going to tell you guys where you can find more information about the study abroad process. And then finally, we'll have our Q&A session. Okay, so the entire presentation will take around 30, 35, max 40 minutes. Probably not 40, but max 40 minutes. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, who we are, we do digital admissions coaching. So we basically help students apply to college. So we're not like educational consultancies. We don't do the entire process for students. We believe in independent learning. So we actually teach students how to apply to college on their own so that, they're able to use our programs, learn how to apply to colleges, learn how to, write their SOPs and so on and go to college. But I'm not here to focus on our programs or anything that we sell here today. This is just a purely informative session so that you guys have a base understanding of how to apply to college. Okay. And about myself, I scored a 340 in 2019 in my GRE exam. So in 2020, I started teaching other students on how to prepare for their GRE exam. And I'm also an incoming master's in mechanical engineering student at the University of Pennsylvania for spring 22. And essentially our goal as an organization is to make it easy for you to prepare for the GRE and apply to master's, MBA, or PhD programs abroad. Okay, so that's all about us. So now here's a bird's eye view of the application process, all right? So it basically consists of 7 steps. The first step is you need to choose your degree and specialization, right? That means you need to choose exactly which degree you want and the area that you want to specialize in your degree. So regardless of what degree you choose, for example, you choose master's in computer science, you have to choose a specialization under that stream in like most cases. So you should choose your degree as well as your specialization. Then you need to choose your target country or countries. So where do you plan to go? So depending on the location that you're going, you'll have different requirements, different dates, different tuition fees, and different visa procedures, and so on. So the target countries are also very important. Then you figure out the program requirements. What are the basic things that you need to fill out in order to be eligible for the program? And then you just fulfill those requirements, right? So if they ask you to take the GRE, you take the GRE. They ask you to take the IELTS, you take the IELTS. They ask you for 3 letters of recommendation, you get your 3 letters of recommendation, so on. So you fulfill those requirements, and then you apply by the deadline, and then you get your admit, right? So some of the universities will reject you, some of them will admit you, and then depending on the admit that you get, you choose whichever one that you want to go to. And after that, you look at getting your education loan and your student visa, and then the final step is just to fly to college. Okay, so if you guys are confused about the whole process, so this is the bird's eye view. Once you have an understanding of what this is, then the rest of the processes will become a little bit easier. All right. Okay. So now, before we move on to the next slide, so next slide is, we're going to go over some degree options, right? So we're going to go over from the most technical degrees and then to the most non-technical degrees, right? So just very quickly, guys, can you type in the chat which degree you guys are planning to apply to? Okay. So if you plan to apply to a master's, what master's? Like master's in computer science, master's in mechanical engineering, master's in data science, or if you're planning to apply for an MBA, type MBA. If you're planning to apply for a PhD, again, what kind of PhD? Like PhD in sustainability, PhD in like physiotherapy, I don't know, there's a bunch of different programs, right? So just very quickly, let me know what kind of degree programs that you guys are looking to apply to in the chat. Okay. All right, so we have MBA, data science, software engineering, economics, ECE, MBA, computer science, marketing, or in HR. Interesting. Public policy, computer science, MBA, and ECE. Awesome. Okay, great. So you guys are a mix of technical stuff and non-technical stuff, and then something in between as well. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we're going to be going through. All right. So degrees can vary from purely technical degrees to non-technical degrees. So we're going to start with the most technical degree that you can get, which is the PhD or a master's with a thesis, like a thesis-focused master's. So by most technical, I mean, the one that's most focused in your particular field. So if you're a computer science student, you take a PhD, it's going to be like purely computer science, right? So that's going to be the most technical degree. Then we also have the research-based masters or the thesis-based masters, same thing. Essentially what happens is it's just like a master's degree program, but at the end you have to do like a research project and have a thesis at the end, and that's what a master's thesis-based master's is. Okay, then we have a non-thesis based master's, which is essentially you just complete all the courses and then you get good grades and you graduate. So that's my master's program that I apply to. Then we have master's in data science or analytics, which I moved to again, move toward the technical side. It's not purely, your base field, but also it involves a lot of science, like a lot of scientific elements to it. So that's where that would fall. And then smack dab in the middle between technical and non-technical, we would have master's in engineering management. So for those of you guys looking to get into like managerial roles, but you want to be in the engineering space, then the engineering management degree is a good option. Then we have master's in business analytics, which is sort of like data analytics, but it's more focused towards business data and improving business operations. Then we have master's in information systems. There's a ton of other information. There's a ton of information systems out there, like, IoT and again, like analytics and all these kind of things. And as a graduate of master's in information systems, you would help businesses apply these technologies into their business to get, improve their operations, improve productivity, and so on, right? So again, this would also fall between technical, non-technical. Then moving towards the non-technical space, we have the project management, we have the master's in finance. Again, economics would also fall under moving towards the non-technical side. There's still a little bit of technical stuff associated because you may have to learn some programs, some coding, some scientific concepts, and so on, right? Then we have the purest non-technical degree, which would be the MBA and master's in management, which is the MIM degree. Then the master's in marketing, and so on. Right? So this is the sort of full range of degree options that are available for you. So if you guys are still exploring the degree that you want to get and you're not sure, then you can just take a quick screenshot, or you can write down the degrees that seem interesting to you, and then you can explore that later. All right. So for those of you guys planning to apply for an MBA or a PhD, I have two very quick notes that I need to tell you guys. So here's a note about MBAs. Just take a minute to read what's on the screen. Right? Okay, so the gist of it is that you cannot apply to an MBA program abroad without work experience. I mean, you can, but the chances of you getting in are very, very low, or the MBA program itself might not be such a great program. Okay, so if you want to get into like a good MBA program abroad, you're gonna need work experience, right? And 5 years is ideal for American universities, 6 years is ideal for European universities, but applying with like 3 years is also like possible. It's like a doable option, like a feasible option. Right? If you don't want to wait that long and you want to get into like the management or like business field, you can also explore the master's in management degree, MIM or MEM degrees. These degrees don't require work experience and they allow you to get into that kind of field, right? It's like a business related field. So that's definitely an option that you can explore. If you want to do like an MBA later, that's totally up to you as well. But these are also good alternative degree options. Okay. Now, if you're applying for a PhD, again, just take 30 seconds to quickly read what's on the screen. Okay, so the gist of it is that when you're applying to a PhD program, you're gonna need research experience, right? That means publications in your name. If you don't have research experience through either internships or publications, it's not a good idea to apply to a PhD program because they are looking for people with research experience, and people that apply are gonna have research experience. So it's not a good idea to apply without research experience. So try to get that before you apply. So one of my friends who's doing his PhD now, he took a year off after college to do research at IISc before, and then get a publication before he applied to his PhD program. Okay. All right. So now let's move on to the most popular countries. So before I give you guys a list of pros and cons, I'm kind of curious to know where you guys are planning to apply. So just very quickly, let me know in the chat what are your target countries. So if you're applying to the US, type US. If you're applying to US and Canada, type US, comma Canada. If you're applying to European countries, which European countries are you targeting? Australia? Let me know in the chat. Okay, great. So most of you guys are thinking of applying to the US. Awesome. Ireland. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Canada, Singapore, Japan. Oh, that's awesome. Japan. All right. Germany, US. Okay. Singapore, Canada, Germany. All right, perfect. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a list of the most popular countries. Unfortunately, Ireland is not a part of that. Neither is Japan. As in like as a target destination, right? And then what we're going to do is first we're going to look at the US, and then we're going to compare all the other countries using the US as a base of reference, right? So here is the US. Okay, so the US has the best quality of education and the highest paying jobs, right? All win-win. But it is the most expensive country to study in, and immigration is really complicated. So if you're planning on living, as in like immigrating to your target country, the US is not a good destination because the immigration process is super complicated. Okay, so then we have Canada. So Canada is cheaper than the US, and immigration is really simple. So if you want to live in Canada after you graduate and you get a job and stuff, it's very straightforward. But the quality of education is a little bit lower. So Canadian universities aren't as well ranked as American universities, right? Then we have Singapore. So Singapore also great quality of education and cheaper than the US. So their universities are ranked pretty well. But immigration is super complicated. It's even more complicated than the US. I think the Singapore gives you just a couple months after you graduate to find a job. And if you don't find a job, they kick you out of the country. So it's not like the US where they give you some time, like a year or two to actually search for jobs. And you probably won't need that much time, but I'm just saying they give you that time to search, right? So even after that, Singapore, immigration is really complicated. If you lose your job, you're kind of screwed. And yeah, it's very complicated. Then we have, Then we have the UK. So UK, great quality of education. Immigration is really simple as well. So if you want to live in the UK after you graduate, very possible. But the problem is that is expensive, as expensive as the US for like, not as expensive, but more or less comparable as the US for like per year tuition, okay? Another thing about UK is that their master's degrees are 1 year long, right? So this is kind of a pro and a con. The pro here is that you only have to pay for 1 year's tuition. So it makes it effectively cheaper than the US. But the problem is that it's only 1 year long, which means that there's a lot of complications that come along with that. The first thing is that if you are from an Indian educational background and you're suddenly, going to like a foreign educational background, it takes you some time to adapt to their type of education, their style of teaching, and how you need to actually study for the exams and so on, right? So for this, with only a 1 year master's degree, your first semester grades might not be so great, and it would take time to adapt, right? Whereas in a 2 year degree program, again, first semester grades might not be so great, but then the rest of the semester you sort of catch up with everyone else, and then your grades will be okay again. And on top of that, in the UK, with only a 1 year master's program, you don't have the time to do an internship before you apply for a job, because you just finish off that 1 year of education and you directly apply for jobs, right? So there are some disadvantages to a 1 year master's program. Okay. Then we have Germany. So Germany, great quality of education, cheap education, and immigration is really simple. So again, if you want to live in Germany after you graduate, super possible. There is a language barrier though. So they do require you to speak B2 level German before you graduate in order to actually get jobs in Germany. So that's kind of a problem. Master's degree programs are over 2 years long. So generally they extend to like 2.5 years for their master's programs, and high admission standards, which means that if you don't have a good GPA, it's going to be really difficult to get into German universities, right? So they require like some strong, they take in like top students. So they require like good like a good overall profile before you apply, right? Then we have Europe. So Europe, again, cheap education, and immigration is really simple as well. But the quality of education is generally lower, and there's a language barrier as well. So language barrier, again, it depends on the country. For example, if you apply to Sweden, there's no language barrier because in Sweden, like pretty much everybody speaks English. But the other countries, you might face a problem, right? Now, in terms of the quality of education, you can say that you can see that sometimes I've written high quality of education or low quality of education and so on. The metric that I'm using to decide this is the average ranking of universities, okay? So if you look at American universities, they generally populate the like top 100 universities, top 25 universities. A lot of them will be American universities. Whereas you won't see a lot of the Canadian universities or a lot of the European universities in those ranks. most of the universities will be a little bit lower, right? So that's how I'm sort of judging. Then we have Australia. So Australia, lower admission standards. So if you don't have a great GPA and stuff, you can still get into Australian universities. Immigration is also pretty simple. So if you want to live in Australia after you graduate, totally possible. But the problem is slightly lower quality of education as well, right? So the quality of education itself will, of course, differ depending on the university you apply to, right? So for example, if you get into an average university in the US versus if you get into the best university in, say, Europe, then the European college is going to give you a better quality of education than the American university, right? So when I say quality of education, I'm talking about the average, not, of course, the extremities, like the best universities in each country, okay? So now let's look at the general program requirements. What are the base things that you need to have in order to be able to apply for a degree abroad? So here you guys can see the application requirements for a master's in mechanical engineering degree at Purdue University, okay? So just take 30 seconds to quickly go through what's on the screen. All right. So these are the basic typical requirements for a general master's degree, PhD, MBA program. Okay. So this is just basically what they need. They'll need your transcript, statement of purpose, letters of recommendation, resume, GRE, GMAT, TOEFL, IELTS scores, whatever. Subject tests are extremely rare. Most of you guys will not have to take it. And then other essay question answers. So they'll sometimes ask you other essay questions and then you got to answer them. All right. So those are the basic general program requirements, but then just fulfilling these requirements does not mean that you'll get into the university. You actually have to be a competitive applicant, right? So the next step is, actually before I get to the competitive applicant part, how you can build your profile, let me give you guys the steps on how you can find your program requirements, right? So there's essentially 6 steps. First step is you go to the target university website, then you go to the admissions section, you go to graduate degree programs, then you find your particular program. You go to your specific program. Then you look at the application requirements. So that's where you'll find the general program requirements for that particular program, right? Then you repeat the step for 2 or 3 universities because you want to have a good idea of what the universities are expecting in general. So you repeat this for 2 or 3 universities, and you do this for each country as well. So if you're applying to the US and UK, you do this for 2 or 3 universities in the US, and then you do the same for 2 or 3 universities in the UK because requirements can change depending on the country. Okay. Next, let's talk about building a profile. How are you guys going to be competitive when you apply to these top universities? All right. So here are the basic elements for a profile. Okay. Just again, take 30 seconds to read what's on the screen. Okay. So when we look at the profile, right, there are core elements and there are auxiliary elements. So core elements are sort of like the basic things that will make or break your application. So things like GPA, GRE score, research or project work, SOP, LOR. So these are the kind of things that really sway the admissions officers to admitting you or rejecting you. Okay. The other auxiliary stuff is nice to have in order to round out your profile, but you should really be focusing on the core elements, right? Now, there are some exceptions, of course. For example, internships, if it's like a really, really good internship, then of course it can fall in like the core category. But generally, internships are not that great. So that's why I put them in the auxiliary category, right? It also depends on the degree you're applying to. For example, if you're applying for an MBA program, then strong work experience is really important. And impactful extracurricular is also important. Then, of course, there's the whole interview as well. So you ace all these things, right? And then for PhD, of course, research is going to be the most important element of your profile, right? So again, if you guys need to take a screenshot of this, just go ahead. If you need to write it down very quickly, go ahead. We're going to move on to the next thing, all right? Then we have the timeline of the process. So how are you guys going to basically break down the pieces of your application, right? So when are you going to take your examination? When are you going to apply to college? When are you going to get your loan, visa, all that kind of stuff, right? So first thing, before I get to that, just a couple notes. First off, there are 2 main intakes, right? You have the fall intake and then you have the spring intake, right? So fall is traditionally the more popular intake than spring. So fall intake means classes start in September or October or August, depending on the university. Spring intake means classes start in Jan, right? So fall is more popular because students tend to graduate around that April, May, June time, and then they can just go to college right after they graduate, right? So that's why fall is more popular. More universities offer a fall intake than a spring intake. Not all universities will offer a spring intake, but but all universities will offer us fall intake. Okay. Another thing that you guys need to know is that the American deadlines are the earliest. Okay. So if you guys are applying to US and other countries, you need to prepare yourself for the US deadlines because those are the earliest deadlines around the world. Right. So the graph, like the timeline I'm about to give you, that's the timeline when you're applying to the top universities in the US. Okay. Depending on your earliest deadline, depending on the country that you're applying to, you can push everything by a month or two, again, depending on your deadlines, right? So again, we're going to go semester-wise first, and then we're going to go month-wise, right? So semester-wise, in a 4-year degree program, you take your exams in the 6th semester or between your 6th and 7th semester, or early in your 7th semester. Then you apply to college late in your 7th semester, and then you get admitted in your 8th semester, and then you fly after you graduate. So this is, for people who are not planning to take work experience or anything like that. Okay. Now let's go to a month by month breakdown. So this is the timeline for a fall 2020X application. So let's say you're applying to fall 2025. This is what it looks like in 2024 and 2025, like what you need to do, right? So let's say you're applying to fall 2025. That means in 2024, you need to spend the first initial months, looking at the programs, preparing for all the exams you need to take, and so on, right? And then you take your exams by September of 2024. Then you shortlist your universities and get your letters of recommendation, write your SOP, all that kind of stuff in October and November. And then top university deadlines will be in December. So by top universities, I mean like MIT, Stanford, all these guys have deadlines in December. So depending on the rank of the university and the country, the deadline can vary. So the earliest deadlines are usually early December, late November. If the rank of the university is a little bit lower, they can push it by a month, month and a half, 2 months, 3 months. Generally, Australian universities, European universities will have deadlines really late, like February, March, even sometimes April. But yeah, this is the timeline for like a top US university application, right? Then you get your results in February, March, and April, and then you'll know which college you're going to. And then in May and June, you figure out the whole loan process. You apply to your visa in August, and then your classes will start in September, right? So again, take a screenshot if you need to, take very quick notes so that you understand how the timeline of the process works, and then we can move on to the next slide, all right? So moving on in 3, 2, 1, go. So now let's talk about getting an education loan and visa. So this is something that is, how do I say? It's something that isn't necessary right now, right? So now you guys are still in the beginner stage. This is called the beginner's guide, right? So in the early stages, you don't have to worry about getting an education loan visa right now. But then later, of course, how are you going to get that? That's what I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you some very quick information, very briefly about the whole process, right? So again, about education loans, take 30 seconds to read what's on the screen. Okay. So when you take your loan, you can either choose a bank or a non-banking financial company. So a bank would be like, HDFC, non-banking financial company would be like, Prodigy Finance, right? So you generally apply after you get admission, but you can actually start applying even before. So you get something called like a pre-approved loan and stuff, right? So you can apply approximately around the time when you expect to get admitted. That's when you start applying for your loans, right? So you'll need a co-signee. So the co-signee is just someone who is earning money steadily, month by month, who's salaried basically. This person is not going to be the person who's going to pay off your loan. That's going to be on you. But this person is basically just there just for the bank to be reassured of that, okay, someone in the family is at least earning, so that just in case something happens, this person can help pay off the loan. Okay. So you can that amount take is generally the tuition plus for that's generally that universities want to see before they offer you their documents, and you can start applying for the visa and all that, right? Now then you can take an additional loan amount later if you want. You don't have to take the entire loan amount, of course, if you have assets, and then you can take whatever you need else, whatever else is required to fulfill that requirement. You can take that as a loan, totally up to you. All right. Again, about education visa, just take a quick couple seconds to read what's on the screen. Okay, so the visa interview is always conducted at an embassy in India, like the country's embassy in India. They ask you simple questions about, why you're applying, what are your career goals, why you chose that country, why you chose that university, basic stuff. And then it'll be conducted about 1 month before you travel. Of course, the rules and questions, everything changes from country to country, but then this is how it works generally for the US. You schedule your visa interview to be approximately 1 month before you fly. Okay. Now we have the FAQ part. So if you guys have any more questions, you want me to answer, just feel free to type them in the chat. So after I get to the FAQ part and where you can find even more information, I'm going to be answering all your questions. Okay. So let me just quickly go through what are the most frequently asked questions that I get asked about, college admissions process. First question is, how important is the GPA? So unfortunately, guys, the GPA is super important. So if you guys are in the top 5% of your class, that's the best GPA to have. If you're in the next 15 to 20%, that's also like a good GPA. The next 20% would be like a decent GPA, and anything lower than that is not a good GPA. Right? So that's sort of how the GPA tier works. Then how do you get into Stanford, Harvard, MIT, all these top universities around the world? So essentially, you need to have a strong profile. So this means a stellar GPA, great GRE score, you have strong research work or projects or internships, you have a clearly defined statement of purpose, your letters of recommendation all say you're like an amazing student and all that. So those are the kind of people that get into these top universities, right? Now, how can I find colleges that are good for my field? So what you guys do is you go to topuniversities.com, okay? You go to rankings, then you go to rankings by subject, right? And then you can find the subject that you're planning on applying to, or at least somewhat close of a subject, and then you can see all the ranks for that particular subject, right? Sometimes you won't find the exact rank. For example, if you're applying to like cybersecurity or something, right? There's no ranking for cybersecurity. So what you do is you go through the ranking for computer science. So cybersecurity is going to be done by the computer science department. So you're looking for basically the rank of that department around the world, right? So these are the steps on how you can find colleges good for your field. Now, how do you apply to scholarship? There are essentially two main ways, right? The first way is through the financial aid section in the university website. They'll tell you what kind of scholarships they offer, what are some other scholarships you can apply to, how do you get assistantships, and all these kind of things. Second way is through open scholarships for Indian students by the Indian government or companies in India. So there's scholarships, by Tata, and there's a Fulbright scholarship sponsored by the government. There's a ton of scholarships for Indian students, and you just have to basically Google for scholarships for Indian students, and then you'll be able to find many. Okay. Next, is work experience important? So work experience is not that important for your profile. Universities don't really care if you have work experience or not. For a master's program, obviously, for MBA program, it's going to be super important. But having work experience is a really good idea, because for me, like working before I studied was one of the best decisions I made, because it allowed me to build my profile even further. And I wasn't really clear on my specializations after I graduated. So after I worked, I had like a good idea of what's out there, what I like to do, and it allowed me to choose that specialization. And it also allowed me to get like a letter of recommendation from my boss, right? So it gives you all these other benefits, but the experience itself is not that useful. Then, what if you're confused about your degree, your specialization, or country? So don't worry, that's perfectly natural. When I graduated, I had no idea about what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, what degree I wanted, and so on, right? So don't worry, don't rush. Take your time, right? Speak to your professors, seniors, attend webinars like these, and Google for some ideas, what are the different programs out there. Take online courses to figure out whether the specialization is for you. For example, when I chose robotics as my specialization, before I did that, I took like an online course on robotics just to see if I actually enjoy robotics, if I can see myself sort of doing this in the future, and so on, right? And the last FAQ is studying in India versus studying abroad. What is the difference? Which one's better, right? Now, the thing is, there's a misconception that studying abroad is a lot more money than studying in India. And that's not exactly true, right? So if you get a good job in India and you live in India versus if you get a good job abroad and you live abroad, the purchasing power in both of those countries, as in the quality of life and stuff that you're going to face, is going to be more or less the same. The difference is that abroad and stuff, a foreign degree really helps you get that international career, so you can work in different countries, and it helps you immigrate to different countries. So now, of course, both of these things can be done with an Indian degree, but it's just a lot more difficult, right? So study abroad, if you want to have an international career, if you want to leave India and live in a different country, then studying abroad is perfect, okay? If you want to study abroad and then send money back to your parents and stuff, then that's also a good idea to study abroad, because when you convert that money from whatever cash you get there, convert it back to Indian rupees, generally it's like a huge sum, okay? But then for you, like your own life, studying abroad and studying in India, quality of life is going to be more or less the same, right? Okay, So now this is the agenda that we just covered, right? So we went through the bird's eye view, the application process. We looked at the different degree options. We went through the most popular countries, the general program requirements, how you build a competitive profile, a timeline of the entire process, getting your education loan and visa, the FAQs, and now I'm going to tell you guys where you can find more information. Right? So where are you going to find more information if you want to learn more about the different programs out there, which exams to take, basically whatever information that you're looking for. Okay. So for this, honestly, the best place is just us, right? So we have like an Instagram page where we post pretty much about like every single degree program out there. So like urban design, architecture, computer science, embedded systems, AI, pretty much every single degree program, we're trying to post it on our page, give people like, okay, what are some top universities for this program? What are some specializations for this program? And so on, right? You can also DM us on Instagram because we always answer to every single DM. And then, of course, our YouTube channel, because on our YouTube channel, we have a ton of free information about, how you can find scholarships, how you can write your GRE exam, how to choose between GRE and GMAT, MBA versus MIM, MBA versus PhD versus Masters, how to choose your specialization, how to shortlist universities. All this information is available on our YouTube channel. Okay. So now that's it for the session. Thank you guys so much for attending. So if you have any more questions, feel free to type it in the chat. So for now, I think until the questions run out, or maybe until 6 p.m. or something, I can take your questions and I'll be able to help you out. All right. So let's get started. What are your questions? All right. So Rishit says, do German universities accept GATE scores? So some German universities do, some will not. I mean, this is the sort of the same thing, depending on which university you apply to, right? So in German universities, some of them accept GATE score, not all of them might. Same thing for European universities, some of them might, but not all of them will. Right? So again, GATE score is something that you don't need to really focus on when you're applying, right? Because the reason why I say that is because GATE takes a lot of effort, right? So, and GATE, the main purpose of why people write GATE is either to get into awesome government jobs or to get into like a master's program in India, right? So if you are exploring master's programs in India and in Germany and stuff, then of course take GATE because it'll serve both of those purposes. But then if you're only looking to apply to German colleges, then don't bother taking GATE, right? It's an unnecessary effort that's not really going to give you a lot of an advantage over other candidates, right? So try to focus on your research work, your projects, your internship, your GPA. All these things are going to matter when you apply to colleges abroad. Okay, next. Part says, at the start of the webinar, you said that you also teach students how to crack the GRE and get admitted. How can I contact you? So if you guys want to contact us, again, you can see on the screen, that's our email address, right? So it's on the screen, right? Yes, it is. So you can email us, on that email address, ask us any question. For the GRE, we have like a special webinar that we run every Monday and Thursday, where it's just like me teaching my strategies, like things that I did for my GRE prep. And also at the end of that webinar, I also introduce people to my GRE programs, and you'll give it like a sweet discount and stuff to webinar attendees. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can absolutely do that. Muskan asks, I'm in final year of engineering and I'll be applying for MS this year. Will I be asked as to what I have done during the 1-year break? Also, how can I improve my research profile? Okay, so if you're in your final year of engineering and you're applying for master's in 1 year, then I'm guessing you're planning on filling that time, right? So within this time, you won't generally be asked, but it's a good idea to let them know what you plan to do, right? Some universities will explicitly ask you from now until the time you are matriculated, what do you plan on doing, right? But in your SOP, it's probably a good idea to state that, I'm planning on taking an internship, I'm planning on doing a couple of projects to prepare myself for grad school. It's a good idea to talk about it. Universities generally won't ask, so if you don't have a plan, you don't have to tell them anything. But if you do, it's a good idea to let them know. Okay, Rishi says, can you explain priority and general deadlines? All right, so priority and general deadlines, they're mainly for undergraduate programs. For masters, you don't see it much. You see it in a few universities, but not a lot. So priority deadlines are essentially deadlines where you apply. It's like before the general deadline, and it's like the deadline for you to be considered for the scholarships and for you to get like an improved admit chance. So if you can apply to the priority deadline, absolutely do. There may be a catch because sometimes if you get admitted through the priority deadline, then they may ask you to like submit like a higher. They may ask you to like accept the offer right away before so that your seat is blocked, right? So there might be some catch. There might be some catch to the whole priority deadline thing. But I would recommend that if you really like a university and you really want to go to that university, apply to the priority deadline. It's usually about a month before the actual deadline. Okay. Next question.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sachin, but your screen is not visible.
Oh, so really? Okay. How about now?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay. There isn't really much else on the screen, guys. It's just my email address and our Instagram and our YouTube. So if you just take it down really quickly, and then because I need to switch back to actually see the questions, right? So I'm gonna give you guys like 5 seconds to either take a screenshot or write it down, and then I will move it back so I can see the questions. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Next question. So tell us more about LORs and SOP. So SOP is generally, it's just like a document that you need. It's like an essay that basically details why you're applying to college, what do you hope to get out of this degree, what you want to do in your career, and so on. Right? That's what that is. And pretty much every college will require something of the sort, either an SOP or like a smaller motivation letter, or maybe they just ask you some essay questions. They need you to answer those questions and so on. Right? So every college will expect some kind of thing like that. Right? Then for letters of recommendation, you will need letters of recommendation. Generally for master's programs, you'll need 3, right? So you can get them from your professors or your supervisors. Yeah, and depending on the university, again, generally universities will ask for minimum 2. That means at least 2 professors. And then the third one can be either from a boss or like an internship supervisor or like another professor, totally up to you. Okay. Bhavni says, is it absolutely necessary to have some work experience for MBAs? If you want to get into a good MBA program abroad, then yes, it is necessary to have work experience, right? You can apply without work experience, but the chances of you getting in are very, very low, especially for a good MBA program, right? And the thing about an MBA program is it's the last degree that you can take, right? So after an MBA, generally people don't take any kind of degrees. So it's best to really wait, build your profile, get into a good university, and then proceed forward, rather than just hurry your MBA, get into some random university, and then not do so well after in your career. Right? So if you are planning on applying to an MBA and you don't have work experience, I would highly recommend that you explore Masters in Management, which is the MIM degree, or Masters in Engineering Management also is a good idea. Which brings us to our next question from Karthik. Can I know more about MIM and MEM? Okay, so MIM and MEM, they're basically management related courses. And the difference being that MEM is generally meant for engineers trying to get into management related roles, whereas MIM is not just for engineers. If you want to specialize in finance or strategy or risk or analytics, whatever you want to specialize in, you can. Whereas for MEM, there isn't really that kind of specialization. It's mostly focused on just engineering focused management. Besides that, MEM is like a 2-year degree. I think MIM doesn't have to be 2 years. Sometimes it's shorter than 2 years as well. Depends on the university. And neither of these programs require work experience. So it's awesome for you guys who are not looking to work before you graduate, right? And you want to get into like a kind of like a managerial business kind of role, then these are great programs. Next question comes from Amisha. She asks, in UK, since master's is 1 year long, so is the syllabus cut down or is it the same when compared to a 2-year master's? I've spoken to someone who has went through a 1-year master's, and she says that it is the same as a 2-year master's. But to be honest, it sort of leaves you wondering, right? Because in a 2-year master's program, you generally, at least in my master's program, I'm taking 10 courses, or I will take 10 courses over the spread of 2 years, right? Whereas in a 1-year program, what are you going to take? Like maybe 3-4 courses per semester. So you would be taking fewer number of courses, right? So technically, yes, it would decrease the depth of information and the number of courses and stuff that you can take over that 1 year. And they really do cram it within that 1 year. So it's going to be pretty hectic as well. Okay. Then next question comes from Dishika. Is it important to have research papers for a master's degree? If you're applying to a research-based master's degree, then it's important to have it. Otherwise, it's not that important, but having research papers are really nice because it's sort of like a stamp of approval on your project by professors, like from conferences and stuff, right? So rather than having just a normal project, if you have like a research paper, it shows that you actually did like a lot of work, and other professors have objectively stated this work as being, credible and, of a certain standard, right? So try to get research work if you can, guys. It'll really help you out a lot. Praneet says, can you please show the most popular country slide again? Sure, I can show it for a couple of minutes. Where is it? Here you go. Take a screenshot, Praneet. I think that's gonna go a lot faster, right? So I'm gonna give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Next question. Parth says, I want to do MS in embedded systems. So which exam should I give? GRE general or GRE subject? Most of you guys will only have to give the GRE general exam. Okay, so GRE subject exam, you should only give it if at least 2 of your target universities ask for it, right? So for me personally, when I was applying, one of my universities, Cornell University, they asked for GRE in math, and no other university was asking for GRE subject test. Okay, so I just decided not to apply to Cornell, right? Because why would I spend all that time taking, preparing for one exam just to apply to one university with it? This is not worth it, right? So unless at least two of your target universities ask for a GRE subject test, don't bother taking it. Just take the GRE general test. Utsav says, is it necessary to have research papers or research experience in Master's in Computer Science? Again, it's not necessary, but it's nice to have because it will help you boost your profile. Tushar says, is it possible for me to switch to computer science or data science courses after I'm done with my BTech if I'm currently in EC branch, first year? So to switch to computer science, like to get a master's in computer science, it's kind of complicated if you're not a computer science student, because they generally have prerequisites, as in you need to take courses in like, databases and algorithms and operation systems fundamentals and all these kind of courses. You need to have them in your undergrad to be eligible for a master's in computer science, right? That being said, it is possible, but it's just difficult because either you have to take those courses outside from some other university, or you have to apply to specific master's in computer science programs meant for students who are not computer science undergrads, right? And those programs are extremely competitive, right? And data science is very possible. So EC students can easily switch into data science. Anybody can switch into data science, I think, as long as you have like a strong mathematical background in your undergrad. So like any engineering course would be counted as like, mathematical background course. So you can switch into data science, no problem. Computer science is a little bit more complicated. Okay, Mihika says, I don't want to immigrate in a foreign country. I want to work abroad for some time and come back to India. Will studying abroad be a good idea for me? Yeah, you can go ahead and do that, no problem. If you study abroad, you work for a while, and even if you change your mind and you want to have like an international career, then that gives you that option. So, and of course, you'll be able to earn like quite a bit of money, have like a strong amount of savings before you come back to India. Now, your competitiveness for jobs when you come back to India, it's not going to be like a huge advantage or anything. You're not going to have a huge advantage over other people from like really good universities and having really good work experience, right? So you can still go, but I would recommend that you sort of come back after you complete your education loan, right? And the reason why is because if you have an education loan in dollars and if you're earning money in rupees, that's going to be really difficult for you to pay that back, right? Whereas if you have the education loan in dollars and you work for a while in the US, you complete that education loan and then you come back, then you're free of debt, right? Okay. Then Muskan says, how can I improve my research profile other than research papers? So research internships, you can, but basically research papers are like the more straightforward way to improve research profile, right? Research internships is also something that you can explore. Risha says, on average, how many published research papers can constitute a better than average research profile? I think if you have two, then that would be considered a better than average research profile, right? Especially if they're like two good papers, as in like good conferences, like, IEEE or something, or like, journal papers and stuff, right? So depending on the quality of that research paper as well. Disha says, can you please tell me the pros and cons of pursuing MTech from abroad versus India through GATE? So the thing about GATE is, it's nice if you have a good GATE score when you're applying to, sort of Germany or whatever university that's accepting it, because most universities do not accept a GATE score, right? So if you do have a great GATE score, they're going to be like, okay, that's great, but then where's if you have like a crappy statement of purpose, if your letter of recommendations suck, and you don't have any research work or projects or internships in your undergrad, then they're going to be like, what did you do your entire undergrad time? You have nothing to show for it, right? So they're not going to like it. Even if you're like a GATE topper and you don't have those kind of things, they're not going to like it. So if you apply through GATE, first of all, not all universities accept a GATE score. Second thing is, if you are looking to apply abroad, it's a waste of resources to prepare for GATE, right? The reason why is there's a lot more other things that you could be doing that are more important for your study abroad profile than the GATE exam. The GATE exam takes a lot of time and effort and is really good for people who want to do masters in India. But if you are looking to only do masters abroad, then preparing for the GATE exam is not a good idea. Okay. Next we have, okay, so if you're open to both, right? If you want to do MTech in India or abroad, depending on the university that you get, then sure, you can apply to GATE. But again, it's not a good idea because it's, again, a waste of resources, right? So if you apply abroad, you need to have good, like projects, research work, internships, have like a strong GRE, like not a GRE score. If they ask for a GRE score, you need to have a GRE score. You need to prepare for the IELTS or TOEFL if the university asks you for it. You need to have, if we want to do an internship, you can absolutely do that. But then all this is time that you could be spending on the GATE, right? Whereas if you're preparing for the GATE, all that is time you could be spending on the other stuff. So they both have different requirements. And if you try to fulfill them both at the same time, you're not going to end up with the most efficient application. So I would recommend that you either pick studying in India or studying abroad and then focus on that. If you want to do both, you can, It's just not a recommended route. Okay. Mika says, I don't like to code much, but I've developed an interest in data science. Will it be a correct field for me? Data science does require quite a bit of coding. Consider business analytics. It is not as much of coding, but you still get to work in data, right? So data science, I think there's a little bit of coding involved in terms of the algorithms and yeah, all that. So business analytics, not too much coding. I think you'll be using more programs and stuff. So yeah, check out business analytics. It's very similar, but it doesn't require as much coding. He says, do German universities provide free education? They provide nearly free education. I think it costs around 800 euros per semester or something, which is something like, how much is that? Maybe 70K per semester, which is almost as cheap as like an Indian education. So compared to like how much US universities and like, other countries charge, that's almost nothing. So they provide almost free education. Bishop says, what are mistakes that should be avoided in the entire process? Should I start preparing for GRE in the first year? Don't start preparing for GRE in the first year. The biggest mistake in the entire process is not starting early, right? So if, first of all, preparing for the GRE in the first year, you can do it, but it's not really recommended. You can save it for like third year, even like late second year, totally up to you. Focus on your GPA, focus on building a rounded out profile through research work, projects and internships and work experience if you want to, and like getting a good GRE score and all that, right? So you should be trying to build like a rounded profile, and to build a rounded profile, it's better the earlier that you start, okay? So if you start really late, then again, you don't have time to do research, or you don't have time to, like pick the proper universities, you don't have time to prepare for the GRE and so on. So try to focus on the entirety of your profile, all right? Amisha says, can you choose your specialization after taking certain courses in MS and CS, or you got to choose your specialization beforehand? I believe you have to choose your specialization beforehand, right? When I applied, they asked me to choose which specialization I'm interested in. But if you want, you can always choose one specialization, and then in your first semester, you can shift specializations. It's perfectly fine. I think within the first 2 or 3 weeks, you have to decide. But even when you apply, they will ask you for what specialization you're interested in. Praneet says, how is New Zealand as an option to study MA economics? So New Zealand is a pretty good option because it's relatively cheap to study in New Zealand, and immigration process is super smooth as well. Now for MA in economics, that really depends on how much economics related jobs there are in New Zealand, right? New Zealand has a very small economy, so the number of jobs available are very small, but at the same time, the number of graduates available, number of people applying to those jobs are also very small, right? So I'm not really sure for a specific niche field like economics, it might not be the best place, but honestly, it's better to ask people who have graduated from New Zealand in your target degree program to be able to get the most accurate information. Okay. Utsab asks, what should be the perfect number of universities to keep as target universities for MS program? 6 to 8 universities. Deshika says, what is the difference between data analytics or data science? How should we weigh both programs? They're very similar. I think it's a very small difference. I believe data analytics is more about how you take whatever data you have and then apply it to get like a result that you want, right? Versus data science is more about the kind of questions that you ask in order to be able to aggregate that data. So I believe that is the difference. Even I'm not too knowledgeable about that. So I would recommend that again, either you Google or you speak to people in that particular field. They'll be able to instruct you much better than I can. Okay. Last question is, if you want to go if we want to go a year or two later than when we applied, i.e. after some work experience, then how can we state that in the application? You cannot. Once you apply to a fall 22 application, then you have to go in fall 22, or you reject the application, right? You get your admit and you reject your admit if you're not planning to go in fall 22, right? So you have to apply to the intake that you're planning to apply to. Sometimes programs will allow you to defer like a semester or 1 year, but that's only in extreme cases, right? Either like some medical emergency, or if you're being drafted to service, like a military service, or for example, COVID-19. So I was able to defer my program for 1.5 years because of COVID-19, right? So unless there's some extenuating circumstances, universities will not allow you to defer. So you should only be applying to the intake that you are planning to go into, okay? So I think that's it. Those are the questions we have, and that's the time we have the questions as well. So it's like the perfect end.
So if there is any other question, please state that in the chat box, or we will be concluding with the session today.
You guys can also email us, email us whenever you want. You can connect with us on Instagram as well. I'm putting our email address in the chat, and I misspelled my email address. Hold on. There we go. So that's our correct email address. So if you guys want, you can just copy it down somewhere and send us an email if you ever have any questions. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel and Instagram page. There's a ton of answers to all your questions right there. Okay.
So thank you so much, sir, for enlightening our minds with your tips. I'm certain that all of us are in a much better state of mind than we were earlier today. And it was a privilege to have you as a speaker. I, Dishika Chopra, Joint Secretary of BVPCSI, on behalf of the entire organizing team of this event, would like to thank all the esteemed participants and our speaker for marking their presence in this event and making it a huge, huge success. I would also like to thank the organizing team for the event. It was a pleasure to have all of you as a part of our event. And once again, thank you, sir, for making this event an utter delight and so insightful at the same time. Also, before leaving, do fill the feedback form that was provided in the chat box earlier. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you guys so much. And yeah, make sure to fill out that form. All right. Bye-bye.